titled to do with countering extremism, the transformation of the ego. And we're very privileged to have Sheikh Kabir Edmund Helminski to join us and address this subject. Very briefly, in terms of the subject matter, extremism in Islam is something which is obviously, unfortunately, quite prevalent in the news, and more generically, there's the age-old sort of statement about religion being linked to the strife in the world and wars in the world, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. I actually had an interesting quote the other day, which is from Jonathan Swift, which talks about the fact that we have just enough religion in the world to actually make us hate each other, but not enough to love each other, which I think is an interesting backdrop to this. The subject today is really focusing my understandings on the idea of self-purification and understanding that concept of bringing about change, and the concept of transforming the ego, something which has really been a central part of the Islamic tradition, broadly and specifically within the mystical Sufi tradition as well. And we're delighted to welcome Sheikh Kabir Helminski to address this. Very briefly, he's the co-founder and co-director of the Threshold Society, which is a non-profit educational organisation which has been working through the Medley tradition, spreading the study of Sufism and spiritual psychology. He's well published with several books on Sufism and several articles as well. He began the study of Sufism through the Medley order and became Sheikh of the order in 1990. Since then, he's travelled extensively, spreading the message of the religion of spiritual cultivation. And the Threshold Society now is based in the USA. One of his accreditations, he was in 2009 was named as one of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world by the Royal Islamic Strategic Studies Centre in Georgetown University. I don't want to sort of go on too much without sort of taking sort of anything away. A few housekeeping points as well. So you've seen notices about the City Circle. So we will be sort of doing a live tweet, as is the trend these days, with the hashtag CC Talks. Any of you who do want to participate, perhaps afterwards, so you don't distract yourselves, feel free to join in. Welcome any comments and feedback. And about the City Circle as well, there's some leaflets at the back about the projects that we run. It's a non-profit organisation. We run several projects in the community. One of them is our regular circles on Fridays, which this is one of the manifestations of. We also run several community projects. A Saturday school, one based in Harrow and one based in West London. We're always looking for volunteers there. And a Feed the Homes project in central London on Sunday as well. Of course, if you can't volunteer with your time, we do also welcome any donations. The talks that we run on Fridays are all sort of funded by the organisation, and there is a cost. So while we don't charge people, we do want to keep an open circle. We do recommend any donations, and there's an opportunity to speak with them at the back if you'd like to do that. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Sheikh.
Thank you so much. So I'm grateful to the City Circle for organizing this event and accommodating my schedule, and for giving me an opportunity to share some thoughts with you. And of course, my main interest for some decades has been spiritual development, and particularly bringing some of the traditions, practices, methodologies of the East to the West, with the purpose of finding a spirituality adequate for our times within the Islamic framework. To give you a little context on how I came to this subject, countering extremism, transformation of the ego. Well, I'll tell you a little story about a dear friend of mine who is a sheikh from West Africa who I've spent a lot of time with. We've lived together, we've traveled together, we've had great times together. And now he's traveling all over the world, and occasionally when I go onto Facebook, I see him posting on Facebook. Again and again on Facebook, I see these pictures of my dear beloved friend who I won't name, And he's always there, he's always surrounded, and he always writes on Facebook with all caps. And it's all, alhamdulillah, mashallah, and here I am with Maulana so-and-so, and city so-and-so, and Maulana so-and-so, and another Maulana. He's surrounded by all these Maulanas. And they're always, it's interesting, they're always old men who look very, very serious. Some of them even look a little bit grim. But my friend from West Africa is not like that at all. He's full of life and joy. He's a Hafiz, and I could call him also the Otis Redding of Islam. He's that good when he sings. But I was just pondering this, and I was thinking, all these events are happening, and all the speakers look a certain way. And I asked the question, where are the women, first of all? Then the next question is, where are the young women? And where are the young men? There's just, as I said, these wonderful, blessed Maulanas and Siddhis and so forth. So I was pondering this, and sometimes when you live with a question like this, it's not too long before Allah provides an answer. A short while later, I got a call from Daisy Khan in New York, who is the director of WISE. WISE is the Women's Islamic Initiative in Spirituality and Equality. And she said, Kabir, we want you to write something. We are producing a handbook and a website to counter the propaganda of ISIS on an Islamic basis, on a Quranic basis. Her husband is Imam Faisal Rauf, who is very knowledgeable and really has a worldwide influence. And then she kind of laughed and she said, yeah, it's kind of funny. There's a bunch of us young girls here, we're taking on ISIS. That was the answer to my question. Where are the young women? They're not necessarily at the conferences, they're in the background. And on September 21st, we will launch this project at the United Nations. So they asked me to write a short piece on the transformation of the ego in Islamic spirituality. They felt that this was a vital part of the picture that they were presenting. My attitude towards this is that true spirituality, which is the awakening of the heart and the awakening of the presence of Huzur, is the remedy for egoism. And egoism is the real kufr. And my brothers and sisters in ISIS and Al-Qaeda, I don't consider them my enemies, if I were to meet them face to face. Their actions I consider despicable. But I would like to think that there's a way to speak soul to soul. There's a way to talk about what really matters and what is truly of value to both of us. And I understand the rage that comes from non-recognition, the rage that comes from the dispossession through imperialism, through the neoliberal monetary system that is pillaging the earth and destroying people's lives economically and in other ways. We understand this. My concern is the same for myself, for you, for the poor people who have blindly, foolishly allied themselves with the kind of violence, tyranny, coercion that is all too prevalent in the name of Islam today. The contribution that I would like to make is a contribution of both ideas and heart, compassion, in order to really initiate a dialogue, initiate communication, because there's nothing greater in the realm of human relationships than to recognize the divine in everyone and in all things, and to honor that, to call that forth, rather than to call forth opposition. So anyway, let me get started with this little bit that I'm going to read to you, and then from there, there will be plenty of time for some dialogue. Islam is meant to be a way of life that guides the soul to well-being and happiness, and that establishes justice and human dignity in society. It accomplishes this not through outer authority, religious hierarchy, or dogmatic belief, but through a spiritual practice that transforms the ego. The transformation is accomplished through the awakening of a healthy and pure heart. The heart becomes the center of our knowing and being. And it is as it is infused with the grace and energy of spirit or will. Through this transformation, the ego self is free from its fears, selfishness, anger, contradictory desires, arrogance, and aggression. Islam is meant to be a renewal of the primordial religion of humanity, which has been lost or obscured over time by the interference of man-made doctrines and rules. It is the essential message brought by countless saints and prophets, revealed once again through the Holy Quran, and exemplified by the one we long for, the one in whose presence we melt, our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his heirs. This way of life can guide the soul to happiness and well-being, because it is based on objective spiritual laws that conform to the nature of reality, and so fulfill the soul's true purpose. We are all born for a single purpose. This purpose might be expressed in this way: to experience and know the true extent of the divine beauty, intelligence, and love. The spiritual practice of awakening the heart through contact with the highest level of spirit is equally effective for all levels of humanity. From the criminal who is destructive to himself and others, to the so-called average person who is just trying to get along in life, and finally even for the saint who lives to be in communion with the divine reality. For a person struggling with the worst human passions, the awakened heart helps to disidentify from those compulsions that feed cruelty, dishonesty, and violence. For the average person, it infuses the self with virtues, empathy, and awareness. For the saint, the awakened heart makes it possible to live moment by moment in the continual remembrance of God. The unconscious tyranny of the ego. The ego is our attempt to attain control and security as a separate entity. For most people, the ego self is constructed from and identified with the outer world. An extreme example of this is the materialistic person who believes only in material existence and seeks satisfaction through acquisition of things and security, through power over the material world. Human beings are largely unconscious of the extent to which they are enslaved by their own egos. In Quranic terminology, the ego is called the nafs. The nafs, in its untransformed state, is a false identity made up of unexamined assumptions and ideas of reality that try to ensure the individual's survival and the greatest fulfillment of his desire. It is, however, unsuccessful in achieving those aims. To the extent that it is cut off from the guidance of the heart, it is incapable of reaching true happiness and well-being. The heart occupies a midpoint between the ego's self and God. Like a transformer, the heart receives the energy of the spirit and conveys it to the ego's self, which is transformed through this relationship. But if the heart is corrupt, dominated by the demands of the ego's self, the heart is in a sense dead. It is not a heart at all. If, on the other hand, the heart turns towards spirit, which exists as a diamond-like non-dimensional point within the heart discovers within itself the objective and essential qualities, such as faith, hope, patience, generosity, humility, and love. If the heart is receptive to spirit within, it can receive the qualities of spirit and infuse them into the character, from where these qualities can radiate outward to the rest of creation. One of the reasons the nafs has such power over us is that when we are governed by it, we don't see it. It becomes our unconscious operating system. We take it to be ourselves. That part of ourselves which could observe the nafs shuts down. It's difficult to step back from the ego, because when we are in that state, we are completely identified with it, having no independent witness, the kind of witnessing that the heart provides. The spiritual training system in Islam, which includes the ritual prayer, zikr Allah, etc., requires the activation of presence, or hudur, and God consciousness, taqwa. Without presence, prayer and remembrance are just automated, unconscious activities. To show up at certain times of day in a state of ritual ablution and to perform the ritual prayer is a challenge to the dominance of the nafs, which of course wants to follow its own desires without restriction. But gradually we can learn to appreciate and even love the state of presence. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said there is no salah without presence. Presence, huzur, is fundamental to all the practices of the spiritual path. Taqwa, which the great Muhammad Asad translated as God consciousness rather than fear of God, is a shift of awareness from the ego's heedlessness to a mindful awareness of the consequences of our thoughts, emotions, and actions. Broadly speaking, there are two kinds of religion claiming to be Islam. The religion of truth, and the religion of fear. The religion of truth is mentioned a number of times in the Quran as a phenomenon that will, quote, shine upon all religion. Its followers are the people of the garden, Al-Jannah, the people of paradise. The religion of truth is essentially a religion of love and mercy. The religion of fear is not mentioned as such, But it is described in countless ways. Those who make a god of their own whims, those who cover the truth, those who spread corruption on the earth. The God of the religion of fear is God without mercy. The God of the religion of truth is above all, the most merciful of those who show mercy. Some Muslims assume that religion is a series of tests and rules to be followed. Following the commands of an Almighty God. Religion is viewed as a strictly defined program of behaviors and prohibitions. The more exactly you follow the program, the more you please God. The nafs likes this game of accumulating reward and avoiding punishment. Frequently, what accompanies this mentality, however, is the compulsion, the deeply felt need to impose these rules and behaviors, dress codes and prohibitions on others, in the belief that this will please God, who will look favorably on the undertaking and grant success and ultimately a heavenly reward to those who follow and enforce the commands. The trap of this is threefold. First, in continually looking outward to see who is failing to follow the prescribed rules, one may be diverted from self-examination of one's own motives and contract the disease of self-righteousness. Second, one cannot truly be a Muslim under coercion. Unless we come to God of our own free will, we are not reconciled to God. Third, the rules, prescriptions, and behaviors being imposed may not be God-given, but man-made. What happens, however, when the commands being followed are just an expression of gender prejudice? What happens when the truth is manipulated to serve an agenda of power and control? What happens when those following the commands and rules are without the most basic knowledge of critical thinking and of Islam itself? And what happens when the overlay of fear-inducing dogma stifles the conscience within the soul? I like to make a distinction between Islam and Islamic packaging. Lots of people will readily accept something if it's Islamically packaged. ISIS is Islamically packaged. But to hear the truth of Islam in a different language, to hear it in a new vocabulary, to hear it and sense it even in other religions, is a possibility for us. The Quran warns us in so many ways of the degeneration of the divinely revealed religion, the religion of the prophets, that it degenerates into an oppressive religion of fear. The people of the religion of fear in extreme cases become the people of the fire, the al-Iman. As Rumi put it, a self-righteous person sees someone sin, and the flames of hell rise up in him. He calls his own hellish pride defensive religion. He doesn't see his own narrow soul. The message and way of life brought by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, affected a transformation in the souls of men and women, a transformation which profoundly affected the societies in which they lived. The first 150 years of Islam, Muslims were concerned primarily with character, sincerity, and a lived experience of the divine. In these first 2 centuries, neither the formal schools of law nor the hadith collections existed. No doubt, the noble character of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his companions were essential to providing the moral energy, the magnetism, the transformation. Islam from the beginning has been a form of concentrated spiritual energy and an effective spiritual training system leading to the transformation of one's very self. The effect of this transformation is that it diminishes egoism, arrogance, and aggression, and replaces these with self-witnessing, humility, empathy, and reconciliation. Egoism is the great corrupter of all human endeavors, including, and tragically, religion. Any true religion or spiritual path should methodically lead to the reduction of egoism and self-righteousness. Egoism is the ultimate idolatry, or shirk in Quranic terms, because it places the human nafs in the center instead of Allah. The out-of-control nafs, engorged on its own self-righteousness, justifies acts of extreme aggression and ugliness, swelling with insane pride, exulting in finding an outlet for its rage. It spreads fitna, tribulation, and breaks the hearts of true Muslims. Egoism is the ultimate manifestation of tyranny, egoism's ultimate manifestation is tyranny. Any person or group that is coercive, that interferes with human free will, except for the common sense restrictions put on criminal behavior, is usurping the place of Allah. Extremist political parties and organizations, theocracies, religious cults are manifestations of collective egoism, that is, the nafs, magnified on a social scale. Every human being is given a self, and this very self is our greatest problem and our greatest opportunity and blessing. The self is both the poison and the remedy. The Quran says, the only religion in the sight of God is self-surrender to Him. And if one goes in search of religion other than self-surrender to God, it will never be accepted from Him. Self-surrender, Islam, is the transformation of the self that leads to an increased capacity to love unselfishly, to consider the effects of one's actions, taqwa, and to sustain an awareness of the divine. All of these without a sense of pride, self-righteousness, or self-congratulation. As the Quran says, surely you shall travel from stage to stage. This process of transformation cannot be accomplished merely by following outer behaviors and formalistic rituals. Transformation originates in the inner life, in the heart of the human being. Someone who is fastidious in the formal aspects of religion may do so with sincerity, but in reality, it is the heart's sincerity and love of God that affects the transformation. The heart is our true center, where we are closest to Allah, the potential integrative power at our core. If the body is like a country, the hands, feet, and various parts of the body are the workers and artisans. There are also elements within us, anger and rage, that act like the police or the army. We also have desires and passions. These are the merchants and tax collectors. extracting what they can. But the heart is king, and the intellect is the prime minister. The heart must keep all of these elements in balance, keeping watch over anger and rage, the passions, and the lazy parts of ourselves that may need discipline. If intellect becomes dominated by passion and anger, the whole country will come to ruin, and the ruler will fall. The heart is the point at which the individual human being is closest to Allah, to the divine reality. Sufi tradition expresses it this way: the heart is the throne of the all-merciful Spirit, and when the heart is pure, it is guided directly by Allah. The heart is the center of our motivation and our knowing, possessing a depth and strength of will that the personality lacks. The heart may even know what the conscious mind denies. When we say that the heart has an integrative power, we're not talking in abstract, metaphorical, or merely intellectual terms. The realization and purification of the heart both opens the doorway to the infinite and also results in a restructuring of the nafs, allowing the ego to become a real Muslim, a compassionate servant of the divine. The most effective vehicle for the transformation of hearts will be a community of people committed to this process, living and learning under the objective spiritual psychology of transformation, and ideally in association with people who have themselves been matured in this traditional knowledge and practice. Such circles of knowers of God were once more prevalent in Islamic civilization and need to be reestablished, though perhaps in new cultural forms. People who are now attracted to the radical messages offered by various extremist groups become servants of a collective egoism, contributing to the disunity of humanity and the corruption of Muslims as well. Islam began as a moral force that quickly expanded over a huge geographical area, not by spreading fear and terror, but by reconciling various communities, including non-Muslim communities, through the reconciling principle, kalima as-sawa. O people of the book, let us come to a reconciling principle among us. Let us worship only God. Let us not associate partners, other gods equal with them, and let us not raise up lords or intermediaries between us and God. When the people of Tyre stoned the Prophet Muhammad, some said he should call down God's curse upon them and have them destroyed. But the Prophet knew that he did not come for destruction, but to bring goodness, even to those who bitterly opposed him. The Prophet Muhammad said, "My religion is morals, morals, morals." What is the meaning of this? Even if a person has little education, if he or she tries to do good in society, this person has morals and is of me. But if a person, even though highly educated, contributes to divisiveness, quarreling, and confusion, he or she has no morals and isn't of me. Much more radical than the false jihadism ravaging the world today is the principle of divine unity, tawhid, which recognizes that the diversity of religions and cultures is ordained by God for the benefit of humanity, in order that we might learn from each other and grow in virtue. If this principle could be understood and supported, Islam could take its place as a kind of benevolent elder brother among the world's religions, exemplifying dignity, tolerance, and justice, as it often has in the past. The most fundamental principle of Islam is tawheed. But it is not adequately understood when it becomes a mere affirmation of monotheism. Its meaning is much deeper. Tawheed is serving and recognizing the divine in everyone and all things. Yet religion is often used to divide and separate humanity. Imam Ali said, "I am either your brother in Islam or your brother in the family of Adam." We tend to form judgments. Who has more power? Who is more correct in naming God? This is the kufr of the nafs. Instead of an abyss of separation, I pray that something will happen among us to manifest tawheed, where the distance can be bridged and the holy be fulfilled. We'd be much better off if we were to try to respect the way that each of us is seeking the divine. Every day I pray and practice that this holiness will be attained. Islam requires of us that we recognize that we are one human family together. The Tawheed of Islam requires of us to commit ourselves to serve the divine in all beings. So let us make a promise to Allah to meet at the place where we are one, beyond argument, and to become ourselves the expression of Allah's rahmah. Thank you. I think I'll see people better. Let's see.
Okay. Well, that's fine. So we're going to have a Q&A session now, running on for about 40 minutes. So we'll go on to about 20 past, 25 past. In terms of our prayer, so if you don't mind delaying, if you do want to pray, you can just quite obviously leave through the back. There isn't any sort of formal facilities, so if you can just find a space at the back. In terms of sort of the usual house rules for Q&A, if you sort of I think we'll primarily try to keep it to the topic that's being addressed. Be welcome. If you do want to make a contribution other than a question, more than welcome to do that. But sort of in mindful of time, obviously trying to get everyone to be able to contribute. I may sort of have to cut you off if that's the case, and sort of don't sort of don't take offense or anything like that. So with that, inshallah, the first question we've got. Two mics as well. So if you put your hand up, you bring a mic towards you. That's a good idea. So, question in the front, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for a very enlightening talk. You talked about ego and problems in a sense of the material world earlier on, and perhaps how that can manifest itself in extremism. And obviously when we talk about religious extremism, in this case we talk about ISIS. Or maybe the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, if it's non-religious. I might be even so bold as to say that the bombing of Iraq and the killing of 1 million people is extreme when there's no weapons of mass destruction. Today I just happened to be in Great Ormond Street Hospital, where we have some very sick children, and a spiritual transformation, can probably be very difficult when the physical, or in the sense the material world, people are really struggling to survive. And so if we talk about ISIS, we don't talk about ISIS in a vacuum. We talk about ISIS in the context of maybe an invasion, in the context of a war. Now we have lots of refugees. So, in the context of your talk, can we talk about countering extremism without talking about the physical context that's causing it? You know, so merely we talking about it because the narrative within the West is that we have a religious problem, not a geopolitical problem. Is that why we're talking about it? And also, when we look at the context of conflict, and now we have all the refugees who are coming across, then how does the talk fit into that bigger problem of refugees, destruction, and the problems of war? And as Muslims and as spiritual beings and ego, how do we deal with this bigger problem and worry about what in effect is an ISIS problem within a larger context?
I don't need to reduce the problem of extremism to one spiritual solution, although I think the spiritual solution is applicable under every circumstance. I don't believe it's only applicable under the privileged circumstances that we are living under here and now. If this truth is true, it is as true today in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, and as true for those people who are fleeing these conflicts. The divine mercy operates at every level of existence, in every detail of existence. And it may be that the most extreme conditions are those that lead directly to an experience of transformation and divine mercy, and offer the opportunities for courage, unselfishness, and unconditional love. So there is a spiritual truth at the heart of this. I'm not trying to say that this addresses the political issues, the economic issues, the practical issues. We are all here to address what we can. And it will be love and mercy that operates effectively in those other spheres as well, and will be informed by these same spiritual principles to make them more effective in medical service, in refugee assistance, in every sphere of life. Thank you.
Say hi to the back.
Simon, you've given a very lovely idealistic talk about how you can change the ego. But throughout the talk, the idea is wonderful. I couldn't help wondering, how do we apply this in a very practical way in this current problem that we're having, particularly with ISIS, with the young girls going over? Just really a practical approach to this idea would be a good explanation.
Thank you. Well, this program that I was invited to participate in is creating a handbook and a website, the purpose of which is very practical. The purpose of which is for parents and others to have some ways to think about these issues when they encounter a son or daughter or relative who is beginning to act a little strange and think in certain ways. So this focus is very practical, and by the way, the project is not limited solely to this spiritual solution. This is one chapter of it. So it is directly addressing this problem to the extent that it's within our scope, within our province to do so, in our lives and the people we come in contact with, which is all we can work with anyway, the people we come in contact with. Ultimately the solution, the spiritual solution, is not to be dismissed as just merely a nice idea, if only it were practical. because frankly it depends on all of us to understand this process of transformation, to understand Islam, or whatever, Islam especially, because that's the framework I'm speaking from, as a program for spiritual training, rather than a set of beliefs or an identity to be defended. It is, if understood properly, the core practices of Islam are transformation. But if they're presented through coercion, if they're presented only as in their outer, external form, the inner reality and purpose is lost. So there's no joy in the religion of fear. There's no satisfaction in the religious of fear except temporary ego satisfaction. So sooner or later people will exhaust themselves with these fanatical, extreme activities. The real satisfaction, human well-being and happiness will come through living from the heart, consciously.
Seeing as I was born into an Islamic family, and into Hamas as well, obviously I've done a lot of youth work and stuff as well to help ISIS and everything, and we'll talk about it in school. But do you think there's anything else that we can do to actually prevent people, and like how media kind of manipulates everything that we say? And obviously I've been in that case as well, where they have manipulated my views and stuff. But is there a way where we can kind of prevent media manipulating our voices?
Say that last part again. Is there a way to prevent what?
Media manipulating our voices.
How to get our voices into the media?
Or how to prevent the media manipulating.
Oh, okay. Personally, I think journalism today and media, one of the biggest problems in all the countries I'm aware of, doing more damage even than the politicians, focusing on the lowest common denominator, sensationalism. So I don't know if we can prevent that, other than to create our own media, speak the truth, however we can. The public world that we see today in the media is like a very detailed canvas, meticulously painted for us. Somebody needs to take a knife to that canvas. Haq, truth, is the foremost virtue and need at a time when we are in really a truth emergency worldwide. So let's acknowledge this, and there has to be thousands of ways to work with it. But the first step, I think, is acknowledging the degree of untruth that prevails in virtually all the media. And have truth tellers. We all need to be truth tellers. Such a big subject, because we have 8 billion people. Everybody has opinions, whether they have facts or not. But you know how important truth is. The Quran says, and Allah hurls the truth. And in the end, the truth will be known. Because falsehood has no power to sustain it.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Marjorie. Interesting to be in such an environment because I was born a Methodist and studied world religions, and here I am in the heart of Islam. I loved what you said about being the compassionate servant of the divine, and that really is the message of all. And as we look at the cross there, it actually is symbolic of crossing out the I and being egoless. So what I'm worried about is how we seem to have got this extremism attached to just Islam. Because here I am from my background, and I'm very conscious that we've got extremist BNP, we've got extremist neo-Nazism. It's been quite sad watching the refugees going to Germany and some places where they've been escaping from all that horror and then getting victimised by extremist neo-Nazis. But it was equally nice to see that tempered by Angela Merkel getting the army in place to set up camps ready to receive the 800,000. So I don't know what we can do about putting this to this, because it isn't Islam, is it? It's not and we need to be sure that when we talk about extremists in Islam, what I see is extremely compassionate, extremely merciful. And we've got this most wonderful family. I've never felt so well supported since I joined the family with all my brothers and sisters. And that's what Islam is about. Certainly not what we've been witnessing, like you say, on the media. So how do we do this? And also, how do we cope with power politics that creates things? And it would seem that extremism really is the extreme away from that compassionate servant of the divine.
Thank you so much. We all agree with you and know exactly what you're talking about. And one of the big problems we face with the media is that it tends to define the discourse and narrow our reality. So, yes, extremism is in all religions. It's in you and I in subtle forms. To the extent that we act out of egoistic tendencies. We judge others. We have negative opinions. We have negative moments. This is also where the struggle lies. So I'm not saying, just pointing the finger towards the most extreme of the extremists. When am I extreme? When are we extreme? When we judge blindly, when we live without empathy and compassion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Salam Sheikh. I used metaphorically, someone needs to take the knife to that compass. And I was just wondering, because we know in the Prophet's hadith, the Sunnah, that he waged wars. There was battle of Badr, there was battle that was jihad was used. In Islam, where do we take the knife or arms?
The knife I was speaking about was not a knife against, not used in violence or war, but in dispelling the illusion. Islam has a history of violence. Most of it, we would like to think, is justifiable when it has been in the cause of justice and human rights. Is there a case for nonviolence and nonviolent Islam today? Yes, there is a big case for a totally nonviolent Islam, because the powers of war, the technologies of war have grown so greatly that they should all be our own. So I think it is time to see war for what it is, as mass murder sanctioned by governments gradually raise its consciousness to the level where it will recognize the immorality of war in general.
We just have, I think, 2 more questions. Oh, okay. Wait, let's see one second. Lady in the middle of this.
Thank you so much for your talk. I have a question, but your comment about the immorality of war made me think that in 2 weeks' time, next at the Excel Centre in East London, the DSEI, the world's biggest arms fair, will be happening, and there are interfaith protests against it, and I would like to invite all of you to come. There will be days of prayer and days of direct action. If you would like to take a stand, this is where people from all over the world come to buy the violence that fuels war. If you'd like more information, I'm happy to give you more afterwards. But my question to you in terms of this transformation of the ego, and what I hear some of us wrestling with is this is a lifelong journey, yes, to be transformed. And in terms of thinking about my sister's question about practical things here, I think I would love to hear what you would consider, what are some small signs that we could celebrate to say, okay, yes, I know I'm pointing in the right direction of being transformed, or I see my brother and sister moving from a place of ego into a place of love. What can I look for to say, because I feel like the journey is a slow thing. It happens person to person. It's not necessarily big and flashy. You know, the media is not going to cover one person who's chosen to be compassionate as opposed to violence. So I'd love to hear what you think are signs that we can look at and say, yes, I see transformation happening in you. I want to affirm that in you.
Thank you so much. Even before I say what some of those signs might be, maybe I wasn't really clear enough in the short amount of time I had to cover a lot of material. The essence of how we can get some perspective on our own nafs. I think this is where it all begins. I did say this. The problem with the nafs is that when we're in it, we don't know it. So the cultivation of huzur, of presence, by which I mean something quite specific, a self-awareness that can step back and observe our thoughts, our emotional reactions, our physical behavior, and see it as a witness, to become our own witnesses. Only through that process, cultivated both through muraqabah, that is contemplation, awareness of the heart, which is also awareness of the mind, and developing this capacity to simply still our thoughts, our feelings, and our body for a period of time to awaken that quality of being that can truly see ourselves as we are, and then to carry that into life more and more, so that when we have a moment of flying, to a negative state, we may catch ourselves, we may see ourselves, we may restrain ourselves, and true taqwa and conscience might prevail. So I see this. I want to emphasize that moralistic preaching isn't enough. People have been told for thousands of years to be good. But how will we learn to be good spontaneously? How will we also be able to see the foolishness of the nafs and its strategies for attaining happiness? This is where a discipline of consciousness is essential. And I gather you obviously are an activist. I've said that the greatest spiritual activists that I know tend also to be contemplatives. Those that have lasted, those that haven't burned out, are people of deep faith. So I believe that contemplative disciplines go together with this activism. That's essential. And we need more, in general, more meditation in our lives, more contemplation, more self-awareness, more consciousness. There's a healing in this. When I said the self is both the poison and the remedy, this is what I meant. Self-awareness of the self is what leads to not only freedom from our own from the tyranny of our own negativity, our own extremism, but also the final criteria, which is increasing our capacity to love unselfishly.
I think we underestimate the transformative effect of transmutation of soul on an individual basis or level. Because if you look at, there can be macrocosmic reverberations from microcosm.
Yes.
If you look at the 7th century Meccan society, when the Prophet ﷺ was there, peace be upon him, and the transformative effect of that, and the Sahaba and that individual transformed that society. So we shouldn't underestimate that individuals who change at that level can impact on society around them and be the solution to extremism.
This is significant because we don't fully account for the spiritual power of virtue and truth, or of love and truth. We think one person has this much energy. But you know, in the Quran it says of the Prophet Abraham, he was not one, he was a nation. Meaning he had the spiritual power to imbue quality into a whole nation. The prophets and the saints are like that. And each of us individually, though we may be one person, we may be psychically, spiritually influential, much more influential than you realize, if your heart is purified. And if you sustain that openness, that awakened heart, it can radiate, as you say, with great magnitude. Okay, this lady will come for hand.
It was just a similar point actually to the one the gentleman just made, which was how significant that transformation was. And we focus on the Prophet because he obviously went through such a deep transformation to receive revelation. But I think it's really worth also focusing on the companions and the society around him, because that group of people were going through such a deep transformation and they were asking such searching questions. So when people ask about the practicalities of what we can do, I mean, I see that in the Muslim community. I see that people have questions and they're looking for answers, but what's really important is to create spaces where we can hold one another to account in the kinds of answers we're finding too, because I think it's very, I mean, I'm convinced that even ISIS is probably driven by, you know, a desire for something better or different in this world, as misguided as it's become. And I think when we're desperately searching, it's really easy to draw on things that are half solutions. So we have to go through a process of knowing our own humanity before we can come to really effective solutions. But once we come to a deeper place of humanity, as the gentleman said, and through the example of the Prophet and his companions, I mean, the transformation can be immense at a conscious level.
I'd like to add to that, along the same lines, and say that the significance of the Islamic view of the human being is very great. Every human being is potentially a universe. Every human being is something immense and infinite. And that true spirituality is a process of discovering the immense dimensions of the inner life, a life which radiates beyond the physical boundaries of any one human being. We have examples of it in our own tradition, of course, the Prophet and his companions, and the immense explosion of a spiritual civilization in a short period of time that cannot be accounted for. America sent 1 million soldiers to Iraq and created only the collapse of civil society and degradation. 14 centuries ago, some tens of thousands of people magnetized with this moral energy created a civilization in a few decades. So we either bring our own disease or we bring that moral energy to the world.
Just time for one more question.
I'm from Southampton, Church. It's a pleasure to be here. It took me 3 hours to get in the actual church. Why are we not recognising the bigger picture as Muslims? I've been a revert since 2012 of the problem we got in our mosques all over the UK, let alone any other country, because we got too many right Islams. And I think the sheikhs, all due respect, I think there should be an organisation that governs them all. We've got Sufi, Salafi, Sunni, but the Christians lead by example. Being a former Christian, evangelical Christian, all due respect to the Muslims in the house, they market and they monitor all the churches. Now, obviously, we get the reputation of being extreme because of these groups that don't welcome the reverts and make sure that all the reverts are looked after. And we have people from different cultures at the mosques that are not teaching the correct form of Islam, as the Prophet taught us, peace be upon him. And I'm just wondering why the sheikhs, like yourself, all due respect, I've never seen before, apologies, are not going to the mosque, making sure that these imams, these Google sheikh imams, who are causing the ISIS, why are they not being governed by a body in the UK instead of the organisations we've seen in the UK that are corrupt? And I don't want to take any further than that. I'm just concerned about this because we hold a platform on the internet, a chat platform, where we do fantastic work with people, but we have a young man in our group, for example, who's being groomed in Lewisham at the moment. He's only just turned 16 years of age, and it concerns me, and he's looking for his first kill. This is not Islam. And I just think there should be an organisation to obviously teach what you teach, which is the true version of Islam and what the Prophet taught. That's my question to you.
Let's all take a breath, and thank you, by the way. I agree with your perception of the problem. Let's all take a breath, and let's just, in our hearts, feel the beauty of Islam. Feel the greatest beauty we've experienced and met in human beings who are exemplars of that beautiful Islam, or beauty in Christianity, or Buddhism. Let's honor this, let's remember this state, let's remember this possibility for all human beings. And keep our attention on that, so that, and of course when I say keep our attention on that, what I really mean is that within our own hearts, we can be connected to that source of that beauty, the source of that compassion, the source of that love, patience, and forgiveness. Because if we were to, for instance, start an organization that were to try to police all the mosques, we would create a reaction. But if we are to take the Tawhidic approach, if we are to, we will have to embody the solution ourselves. Rather than dwelling in the opposition, we will have to become the answer. And I think when faced with that, I think that there's an innate recognition, for the most part, when we meet somebody who has some humility and sincerity, the heart responds to that. So I see it as our responsibility to become those kind of people and to spread that kind of influence, including in political activism, in religious encounter, in every field of human endeavor. And this brings us back to the central issue of understanding the toxic pollution of egoism that masquerades as self-righteousness, being right, wanting to control, wanting to change things by force, leading to hatred, judgment, blame, self-righteousness welling up. All of that is the fire. And we wish to be people of haqq, people of rahman, of compassion, mercy, and also to embody the divine beauty, to do it beautifully, to solve our problems beautifully with love. So this may mean going to the mosque and having a heart-to-heart conversation with somebody who it might be very difficult to have that conversation with. Inshallah, we'll find a way.
Okay, thank you very much. Inshallah, that brings us to the end of the evening. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your time. Facilities for Uncle, so there's a wonderful facility, so in this space you can kind of lead the direction of Catholics that way. Make our observations, there's some restaurants